So when we look at the text for today, we see another story, and in this one, we hear a familiar refrain. They were startled and terrified. They were afraid. Now, you would think Jesus would start to develop a bit of a complex, that every time he shows up somewhere, everybody is just freaking out. But I think it's fair to say that in human experience, we don't often go to a funeral and then 3 days later say, "You'll never guess who I saw at Starbucks this morning." It's just not that kind of thing. And you can imagine how the brains would have just kind of ground to a halt trying to figure this out. And because it's so far out of our frame of reference, we're saying, this does not make sense. And as a general rule, as human beings, we don't like things that don't make sense. We don't like them. We like things that line up and somebody can sit us down, and preferably in an hour-long show format minus commercials, then we'll understand it, right? Well, now it makes sense. Now I get it. No, we don't. We don't get it. Jesus shows up, and we hear about him going through these motions. Come on, guys. It's me. You can touch me. See? Do you have any fish? That's really ramping it up. So in first century myths and stories, if you're really dead, you don't need to eat, right? So the ultimate explanation. So for our modern eyes, we read this story and go, well, that's it then. He must have rose from the dead, right? Well, not exactly. It's kind of hard to just demonstrate that as proof. That's one of the things that I wrestle with. I am the son of a mechanical engineer and somebody who, before going to seminary, enjoyed his managerial accounting class probably too much. And so I like it when things line up. I like it when you can sit down and somebody says, well, A plus B equals C. We don't like those stories where A plus B equals red, right? Because what? We're working with letters here, God. Please, can we stick with the theme? But often in our human experience, we don't, at the end of the day, say, that makes sense. There's an expression that we use at least as often as that makes sense. That other expression, I can't wrap my head around that. Right? That's another expression we use a lot, meaning, I don't get it. This does not make sense to me. And it's not strange little things on the side that don't make sense to us. It's many of things that push us around in this journey of life and shove us in directions that we don't want to go. But curiously, they are often the kinds of things that our heart understands immediately. 20 years ago today, some of you perhaps saw in the news, this is the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. We would have seen images immediately, and our heart would have known instantly. We would have felt it right here. But it would have taken time. And in fact, for those who live in that area and perhaps lost loved ones, there may never come a time when they can wrap their head around it. The heart is there right away, but the head may never get there. We think of the people that gathered at the cathedral in Cologne just a couple of days ago as they mourned the loss of those who died in the Germanwings crash. The heart knows right away, right? But when we talk about it and try and wrap our head around it, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things we can put on that list. But there's a lot of other kinds of things we can put on that list also. I remember before our son Eli was born, our firstborn, there were books, there were checklists. I remember an article entitled, How to Choose Dr. Right. All kinds of things to get ready. Make sure the room is painted, the crib. We were all set. And then he showed up and it was like, whoa, wait a minute. The heart knew, but the head may never wrap fully around it, right? There are all kinds of joyful, awesome, sad, painful events that our heart knows immediately. But the head is slow to follow, if ever. And these aren't strange little things on the fringe of human experience. It is what we are. And in the zip code in which we live in particular, we kind of love this fantasy that as human beings, everything can be calculated. Everything can be reasoned out. And the fact of the matter is, we are not machines. The universe is not some great mechanism. We are creatures of the Creator. We are human beings, and our hearts will often know first. In the text for the day, this is summed up perfectly. With the disciples being startled and frightened, Jesus says, "Peace be with you." And in their joy, they were disbelieving. Their hearts knew, and their heads said, this doesn't make sense. I do not understand. As the passage moves on, Jesus tries to explain it to them. But it kind of reminds me of being a camp counselor the very first day of my first summer when the kids were showing up. The bell rang and registration had begun, so I knew they were coming soon. I was sitting outside my cabin. I had 2 full weeks of training. I had a younger brother and sister. How hard can this be? But suddenly there was a moment where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. No idea. But I had followed my heart to that place, trusting that my head would catch up. During this weekend, you'll notice that Vicar Nikolai is not with us. He is making plans, getting things sorted out, trying to make sense of his future. But I think in today's readings, we would say it a little differently. He is following his heart as he understands God's call to him to a congregation in rural Illinois. He is with them in worship this morning and in fellowship afterwards, trying to discern on some level, because as human beings, we always want to ask, does this make sense? But at the end of the day, the heart will know, and the head will follow. So as we hear this text, the last piece I want to leave with you is what comes at the very end. You notice the disciples don't go, thanks so much for that PowerPoint. We've got it all figured out now. We'll see you later. That's not what the text says. The text said they heard him, and now Jesus tells them something else. You will be my witnesses to all the earth from Jerusalem. Pack your bags, get your shots, because you're going. They too, frightened, startled. This does not make sense. I can't wrap my head around that. But with joy bursting in their chest, they set out to share the good news. So here we are, 2,000 years later, thousands of miles away, and we sense that warmth in our heart. We see it in water on a head. We sense it as we see the community come forward to receive bread and wine. And as we go out, we know that we reflect it to the world around us. So if it doesn't make sense, don't worry. Your heart knows. Amen.